Ask any writer who plans on doing a long stint on a character what is the most important part in their job. They are planning out the next 4 or 5 years of this character's life. Or maybe they're creating a new character just from scratch. What is it? Well, for the most part, what I would see is that there would be 2 answers. The first one is you have to build upon their character development, and the second one is world building, trying to build in new concepts to play with for that world. The first one is what we're trying to talk about today, because a lot of the times their first answer would be character development through trauma. What's the easiest way to bring about trauma? It's to kill off a loved one. Picture this, you are a hero, you just gained powers, you're having fun, you're beating up criminals, nobody could really harm you, and then a loved one dies. Yes, you've had many stints or brushes with death over your very short, or maybe even at this time, very long career, but here it makes you really confront your own mortality. You can die at any given day. Every single time you go out there to fight against criminals, either they have superpowers or not, they could outsmart you, they could overpower you. That could be your last night on Earth and you don't even know it. It's a wake-up call, and this trope is called fridging. Now, fridging was coined by one of my favorite female writers of all time, and that is Gail Simone. Gail Simone is famous for writing stuff like Secret Six, Birds of Prey, and even recently she has done a 3-issue Action Comics Superman run, which is really cool because Superman has the black emblem, kind of like the Fleischer cartoon during that era of Superman. It's really good stuff. I highly recommend you check it out. It was during the Superman Superstars initiative where they had a bunch of writers come on to write Superman for very brief stints of time. But she made a website called Women in Refrigerators, and she made this entire list of women who are usually like love interests or best friends or like family who ended up getting killed just for the male protagonist to have that motivation to finally take action against the villain. How horrible and unfortunate that is, the human psyche, the fact that we need something horrible and traumatizing to happen to us just so that we can stop playing around, so that we can lock in. It sucks, but like from a human perspective, even though it is lazy writing a lot of the time, I can understand why this happens, even though I do wish this trope was less used. There are 2 types of fridging. The first fridging is creating a character just for them to be either killed, brutalized, incapacitated, depowered, brainwashed, all of those, or the R word, I'm not going to say that word, but you know what I'm talking about. Anything to kind of disrespect the character that they made so that this protagonist can now have the proper oomph, I guess, to do what needs to be done. Either to beat the brakes off that villain, or in some cases, to even kill them. And the other example is when there is an established female character and she gets done dirty for the sake of a male figure. This can be vice versa as well. It could be a female character and a male character. Like you could say the same thing about Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor at times. But usually, if I'm going to go by the most common occurrences, is it with a male and a female love interest. And by the way, guys, which one do you think is worse, the first one or the second one? In my opinion, if you're an established female character, that messes me up so bad because I'm like, why would you do that to the queen, bro? Especially if they have a lot of lore and they're a fan favorite character. Whenever I see anything crazy get done to Wonder Woman, I'm like, why would you do that? You could have just picked off Lazy Jane off the street. Why would you use one of the best female characters of all time just to progress the plot? And speaking of plots, one very interesting thing I just thought of just by making this video, the construction process of this, is that fridging is very integral to the superhero genre. We don't even want to see all of the background information of a character. We want to see the character from that starting point, that thing that sends them off to their hero's journey. This is why Uncle Ben has to die before we even get to know his character. The same thing with the Waynes, the same thing with Superman's parents. Yes, we have moments like the Spider-Man trilogy, Sam Raimi that is, where we see Uncle Ben and his character blossom a lot more. And even Ultimate Spider-Man with those 4 or 5 issues of getting to know Uncle Ben, that is kind of the saving grace with these characters, because if you look back to the OG Spider-Man issues, we would realize Ben was only there for a couple of panels before being killed off. Conceptually and on a pay-per-view level, this is very tragic, seeing a kid lose his uncle, but we had no connection or reason to even be sad about it. Even the phrase, "with great power comes with great responsibility," that was never even said by Uncle Ben. It was said in a little blurb above Spider-Man's head as he was walking into the sunset all sad and stuff. Isn't that kind of crazy? But thankfully over time we got to see more of him. The same thing goes with Batman's parents as well as Superman's. As a writer and as an audience member, we technically don't want to deal with all of that boring stuff. Do we really want to see Bruce Wayne playing golf with his father, or do we want to see the inciting incident to why he decided to become Batman? All of this stuff can also be expanded upon through flashbacks, and in my opinion, that is the best way to do it, at least from an origin standpoint. While we don't exactly want to see Bruce Wayne in the situation, being a kid, sword fighting with his father with a mask of Zorro because he was very obsessed with that movie, we don't want to see that. We would rather see a flashback of Bruce Wayne seeing his father save a criminal, save his life because he was a doctor and he had the Hippocratic Oath to save everybody who was under his care. From a flashback perspective, we can see, or we can kind of put pieces together, put two and two together to why Batman has his no-kill rule. We could say, wait, maybe ingrained within him there is a nature versus nurture battle. Maybe the Hippocratic Oath is instilled upon me even as a little kid so that now I don't want to take a life. I would rather rehabilitate criminals. That is all good and dandy, but for the modern age, we have seen how superheroes work. We've seen their origin, we've seen how a lot of this stuff gets glossed to the side. We don't have to deal with all of that in the present day. You can actually develop these characters. At the time that they were created in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it was a different time. You don't have to be one for one with all of these tropes. Yes, at the end of the day, the reason why they're tropes is because they're very common, but as I've said, they are very lazy. And if we were to look at the TV Tropes website, there are a couple ways that this term gets defined. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are a couple here that you guys should keep your brain juices flowing so that you can see how two and two connects. The first one is the disposable woman, and I'm going to read it here. It's a minor female loved one who is killed very early on to motivate a hero to then do heroic things. And after that, she shows very little relevance to the plot going forward. Then there's a friendly target and the targeted to hurt a hero, and this is somebody who's killed off to torment another character who cares about them. The loved ones, the closest to the hero, the more likely you're at risk to being targeted. Then there's the I let Gwen Stacy die, and the hero feels very responsible for the loved one's death, and this usually leads to what they call revenge by proxy. This renders them to want to go out and target the villain that ended up getting on their bad side, and from there we have the best use of fridging, which, let's be honest, there isn't exactly a great use of it, but the best one, which is the last Lenore, which is when a love interest dies right prior to the story or very early on, but then their death remains relevant to the lover of that story, the person who lived through that trauma. It's kind of like they loom over every single thing the protagonist does. It doesn't have to be for the entire story, but at least for an arc. But let's get to some examples, shall we? And the first character to talk about is Alexandra DeWitt, the character that started it all off. And this character, of course, is the girlfriend of Green Lantern Kyle Rayner, and she first appeared in the Emerald Twilight storyline. And we first see her and Kyle in the background. They're on the beach in their swimsuits, and they're looking up to the stars. This was the era when Hal Jordan lost his rocker after the death of his entire city. Coast City was blipped off the map, and Brother was angry, as you might expect. And from there, every single Green Lantern in existence was killed off. And a few issues later, he then gets his Green Lantern ring. Kyle gets it from one of the Guardians of the Universe, Ganthet. And from there, he goes on his merry way, solving crimes, and all of this is a game to him. He's having fun. He's literally in his best dream possible, his personal wonderland. Like, literally, he is an artist. Imagine an artist having a Green Lantern ring. Anything in their mind can then become reality. Why would you not have fun? He was even fighting big-named villains like Mongol, but with the help of Superman. And he was holding his own as well, because at this point in time, if I was going to give any sort of theory, it's because he was the only person riding on the emotional spectrum of willpower. Everybody else was gone, so he had all of that power to himself. The only other person that I think was able to get to this level where Kyle was as a Green Lantern and surpass it was Hal Jordan when he was resurrected. He was a nexus of willpower, even though that there was a central power battery and an entity that actually represented all of willpower. So he was a nexus, even though there's these other huge sources of will. And Kyle, at this time, he mainlined it, but going back to Alexandra, she was his emotional rock, right? His anchor. Whenever he was unsure of something or overwhelmed, she was always very supportive. I know there's a lot of superhero girlfriends who are very oh dude, you have to be very careful, which she was, or they're very angsty or against them being a superhero, which is totally, completely agreeable and makes sense. For the most part, she was all for it, which makes this very tragic because she was not only killed by Major Force, she was stuffed into a refrigerator. You can see where the name came from. And this was just one of the most cruel things that I could ever expect, because not only was she killed, she had no extra backstory. She was just there. There was no development that could be done. Any development that could have happened was now shut off. And she was killed off screen too. Murdered off panel. Stuffed into a kitchen appliance and then discarded. Only for a male character to brood off of. Ron Mars, I love his Green Lantern run. It's the first Green Lantern run I read, and especially the ending of that Green Lantern volume and the Ion Maxi series that he did is some of the best Green Lantern work there is. Even that one-shot, Green Lantern Fear itself, I loved all of that. At the beginning here, he was creating a new character and he was really trying to find his flow, to find his spark. And from here, he did one of the most just on-the-nose expected things that you could actually have. I told you before, a writer's going to think, how can we have any character development? At the very least, in the modern era, we could say that Ron Mars and all the subsequent writers tapped that storyline, that mode right there, everything that happened for the amount of character development that it's worth. They brought that up so many times that we could not forget about it. If we look at the current day, we even have moments where when he's unsure of himself, he would use his Green Lantern ring to create a construct of a diner and a construct of Alexandra to hear out his thoughts. He's over here having coffee, speaking to her about all of his grievances. And honestly, this sucks that this had to happen. Yes, it could have happened later on in the storyline and people would be, of course, upset about it, but imagine if you developed the character properly and then she died. That would not only have more storytelling resonance, a lot more people would be okay with it because they decided to take a bold swing. Imagine if Alexandra was one of the most developed characters in Kyle's run. Nobody would have an issue with it. Everyone would be like, yo, I can't believe that happened. But I'm glad it did because it allowed Kyle to finally mature. Imagine we had like 20, 30, even 40 issues of Alexandra still staying alive. But some of the consequences of her death still emanate to this day. This man is deathly afraid of kitchen appliances, which is mad funny, I'm gonna be honest. Every single time I see him afraid to open a fridge, this is completely morbid and dark, but I'm telling you, I giggled when this man was scared to open up a Black Lantern fridge in the Blackest Night event. That is just the craziest thing I've ever seen a writer do. And the fact that an arm came out of that Black Lantern fridge, whoever wrote that, was that Tomasi or Jeff Johns? Whoever decided to put that on the printed page, you were tweaking that day, but it still led to some good storytelling. And one of the best moments, in my opinion, of trying to redeem this moment was from Judd Winnick and Brian K. Vaughan, where they showed an alternate timeline where she became the Green Lantern and Kyle was the one who was fridged. And it leads to a very interesting character dynamic when both of them are talking to each other. I don't really remember if this is during the time that he was with Jade or not, but previously to this, he was with Donna Troy, so you could see that he kind of moved on. But seeing her in the flesh, in front of him, with the same personality and everything, it led to a complete shift that he had in that storyline. And that is the stuff that I like to see, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this was a very male-centric narrative. Her death really had no meaning beyond fueling Kyle's grief. We didn't even get to see her parents or her friends or anybody like that. We didn't even know what her life was other than being a photographer. Her character was just erased, and to this day, a lot of Green Lantern fans are mad about this because it just didn't need to happen. She got the short end of the stick. It very easily didn't need to be written in the story, and if it did, why did it have to be so brutal? Ron Mars, brother, you could have done way better. And while Alexandra's name is very much attached to the idea of fridging, I do not think she's the most popular. In fact, the most popular character to be fridged is Gwen Stacy in the night Gwen Stacy died. I know that's going to make a lot of people mad because this is one of the most famous and impactful Spider-Man stories there is. A lot of people haven't even read this story in general out of the fact that they don't read older comics, but a lot of people have read Spider-Man Blue by Jeff Loeb, and that entire storyline is just about the anniversary of Gwen Stacy. Peter Parker in the future contemplating and speaking about Gwen's death and how that still impacts him even to this day. Even after being with MJ for multiple years, he still thinks back to it. The setup of this issue, Amazing Spider-Man 121 by Jerry Conway, and I'm pretty sure Gil Kane, somebody make sure to correct me if I'm wrong, but it showcased the depths that Norman Osborn was willing to go down to hurt Peter Parker. This was the storyline that cemented him as Peter Parker's arch nemesis. He throws Gwen Stacy off either the Washington Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge, it really depends on the adaptation, and Spider-Man tries to shoot a web at her ankle, and she falls. And for a second, he thought that he saved her, but then there's this infamous snap sound effect. And from there's always been a debate. Did Goblin kill her by throwing her off, or did Peter's webbing cause whiplash, snapping her neck? And Marvel was always about the intention, and that was that Peter caused the death, but very unintentionally, so they added more layers onto his guilt, and this is what he had to grieve over for years to come. Was it really his fault? In my opinion, I think so, because he could have literally slingshotted himself and caught her instead of shot a web. He's fast enough, but he was panicking. But that doesn't take away all the blame from Norman, because that was still his actions. He has the main priority of fault at the end of the day. And as Peter's first major love interest, it led to a lot of fan backlash. She wasn't even given any real agency. She never had a chance to fight back. She never really had a moment with Peter. She was just a body to be broken at the end of the day. She was a plot device, either just for Peter's growth and for him to really want to kill Norman Osborn. He even shouts it to the heavens as if he was going to do that. Spider-Man would not sink down to that level. He is too noble, and it leads to a very impactful, important scene that always gets adapted when Goblin gets hit by his own glider, gets impaled, and then is killed off. But the sad part about all of this is that it shows something that I'm going to call the Spider-Man curse. And this curse follows a lot of heroes, where if you get too close to them, you will end up dying. And a lot of writers throughout the ages ended up using this curse as a way to kind of justify them killing off a bunch of female characters. This right here really marked the end of that innocence of the Silver Age, prompting the darker era of the Bronze Age. It became, in my opinion, a famous example of women getting fridged, because if we look at The Amazing Spider-Man 2, even though that version of Gwen Stacy was infinitely better than the comics in my opinion, they still ended up using her just as a catalyst for her dying and Peter going through an arc in the way that we define fridging. I didn't even mention it, but it's called the cynicism catalyst. A loved one's death makes the hero grimmier and a more cynical person. We see in Spider-Man No Way Home, after Amazing Spider-Man 2, he ended up being angrier, more violent, and not pulling his punches. It led to a very dark and sour moment of his life because he lost the love of his life. Gwen's ghost, even in the movies, ended up being somebody that lingered in his mind, the one person that Peter couldn't save. And what sucks about this is that there's two very conflicting stories. I saw that a lot of people say that Gwen's death was because editorial wanted Peter to be a bachelor, and Gwen being there prevented that solicitation. Another person said Jerry Conway thought that the character was very boring and just killed her off. And while I love Jerry and all of his work, this just reinforces the fact that fridging is lazy. Instead of improving upon the character and making them better, they just get rid of them because that is an easy layup. Not only does he not have to deal with her ever again, it is an easy way to create trauma and conflict. In effect, this one decision has tainted her legacy. From here, she was more popular dead than alive. And while I've only been talking about civilian characters, do not mistake the fact that this is done to superheroines just as much. And the character that springs to mind when I talk about this is Supergirl in Pre-Crisis, and this happens in the Crisis on Infinite Earths event, one of the biggest events in superhero comics because it effectively rebooted the DC universe for the first time. And Kara, she was fighting against the big bad, the Anti-Monitor, who was threatening to consume all of the multiverse to overlap it with the antimatter universe. And of course, if you have antimatter and normal real matter collide with each other, it's going to lead to a crazy explosion and destroy everything. And she was getting some really good licks in. But the problem with this fight is that Supergirl fights him head on and without any backup so that she can buy time for Superman and the other heroes. And she is brutally beaten and dies in his arms. Superman cradles her broken body and screams in anguish. It's one of the most iconic scenes in all of superhero comics. And what sucks about this the most is that it was an editorial mandate. It wasn't even about Kara's arc. The editors wanted to streamline continuity and make sure that Superman was the last son of Krypton again, even though last son of Krypton literally means male figure. They could have just kept her. She is a daughter, but the focus was on Superman. The emotional weight wasn't on Kara's journey, but how much her death impacted Clark, and that inspired him to fight harder. It was a plot device, right? Her sacrifice, yes, it was noble, but it denied her of any growth, any resolution. The main goal was to push Superman's story, not her own. It erased her legacy. She was not a part of continuity. Unlike Barry Allen, whose heroic sacrifice was always there, always remembered, and was the catalyst for Wally West not only becoming the Flash, but he had that mirror, that ghost always with him, so that he had somebody to compare himself to be better than. And even at his worst, when he felt like he could not reach that legacy, there were people around him to tell him, no, you can do this. Barry would want you to be better. All of that was simply forgotten. She wasn't remembered. And the aftermath is what makes this the worst. In post-crisis, they erased Kara completely, and they had so many different Supergirl hybrids that made her entire storyline needlessly confusing. They wanted there to be only one survivor of Krypton, and for 20 years, Supergirl did not exist in main continuity. There was Matrix and Linda Danvers, but that is not who we wanted. And finally, she appeared in 2004 in Superman Batman Supergirl storyline by Jeff Loeb in The Flash. That is almost at the end of post-crisis continuity. She has like 8 more years until everything gets turned to dust. Why? The bottom line of everything that I just said is what makes this so frustrating is that it wasn't because her story demanded it. That is not why she died. It was because DC editorial wanted Superman to be more unique. They took somebody like Kara, somebody who had to work day in and day out to reach her status of being a legendary hero, and reduced her just so that her cousin can experience tragedy. And then they continued to disrespect Kara for years, not bringing her back until the last possible moment. And to shift our attention to our Bat-themed counterpart, let's talk about Barbara Gordon, also known as Batgirl. Now, The Killing Joke is one of my favorite Batman stories, but we are not letting this one off the hook. Now, this, of course, is written by Alan Moore, and Joker decides to prove that one bad day is enough for anybody to be driven insane, and he decides to target Commissioner Gordon. Right there is our problem. He shows up at Barbara's apartment, shoots her point blank in the spine, and that paralyzes her, and then from there he takes photographs of her bleeding and strips her. The implication here is a lot of, not exactly very family-friendly things, but let's just say they kept it very vague on purpose. And he shows all of these photos to Jim Gordon while humiliating him, taking off all of his clothes, torturing him, trying to break his mind in the Carnival of Fun. And the problem is that Barbara was not the focus. At the end of the story, she just disappears into the background. She's brutally attacked, but it's for the torture of her father, and for Batman. All of her agency is removed because she's not given a voice or perspective on what happened, other than very brief moments in the hospital where Batman meets with Barbara and she's just crying her eyes out. Basically, she was reduced to a prop in Joker's wild experiments, and from there she was a discarded character, very much expendable compared to Batman and Gordon. She was left paralyzed and was even missing from comics for a while. Fortunately for everybody, she was saved by John Ostrander in Suicide Squad. They made sure that she was confined to a wheelchair, yes, but they decided to do some creative salvaging. And here they reinvented Barbara as Oracle. She was basically the genius hacker and information broker of the DC universe. And that really led to her having a lot more respect and influence than she ever had, even leading a team called the Birds of Prey and becoming one of the most important members of the Bat family. Many fans see this very speedy and powerful recovery as something that's really worthwhile and good, but it doesn't erase the fact that her original shooting was an act of fridging. Alan Moore himself even expressed regret from this decision. He even called it exploitative. And yes, that is what it was, and for decades, I think Barbara's paralysis was very symbolic on how female characters were treated. brutalized to motivate male heroes and then sidelined. Fortunately for her, she had a great ending, but a lot of other characters aren't as fortunate. The Killing Joke is an example of so many flukes that ended up happening for something to go right. I have never seen so many writers come in to course correct what happened, and in a very natural way that it seemed like it was always a part of the plan. Thankfully too, because she has become one of my favorite DC characters of all time. And now, just to raise my spirits just a little bit, Nightwing number 129 came out today as of this recording, and it showed me that writers who really care about Oracle can create some very fun and enjoyable issues that show that she's become better than she ever was before. But we are not going to end this video off in a happy manner. No, my dear viewer, we are going to be talking about the fridging of Sue Dibny, the wife of the Elongated Man in Identity Crisis. Now, funny story, I actually don't think Identity Crisis is that bad of a story. People were telling me this is the worst thing since, I don't know, the Antichrist, but here we see a storyline where the superhero community is more developed than ever. I love the way they treated the superhuman community, and that was kind of a layup for Brad Meltzer and other writers to use to fully develop how the characters look and perceive each other. But here, in the storyline itself, is one of the worst things that could possibly happen to a female character. The story begins with Sue and Ralph preparing for their wedding anniversary to celebrate that, and Ralph, he goes away, and Sue is brutally attacked in her own home, and when he comes back, we realize that there is a charred corpse. That is what's discovered, and this sets off a murder mystery. Later in the story, it's revealed that years earlier, she had been R-worded by Dr. Light aboard the Justice League satellite. This doesn't help or deepen her character at all, and the League ended up covering it up by wiping the memory of Dr. Light, reframing all of this as a retcon to Sue's past. It's very horrific, it's just trauma for the sake of shock value. At the end of the series, we see that the ex-wife, who supposedly murdered Sue to gain attention, into Sue's brain with a microscopic device causing an aneurysm, and that led to her dying, and then she burned the body for evidence. She didn't want to kill her, but she's crazy, so that was going to happen anyways. This is one of the key examples of plot device because all of that was just a tool to expose the dark secrets of the Justice League. Even if she was just dead and they defiled her corpse by burning her, that would have been enough for me to be angry. But the fact that they added on the Dr. Light scenario, that just didn't need to happen, especially because it was one of the most wholesome marriages in superhero comics. This, in my opinion, marked the peak of the very grimdark, mature storytelling in the beginning and even the mid-late 2000s. Thankfully, this was not the end because in the 52 series, Ralph does end up dying, but he actually ends up reuniting with Sue. And from there, they become basically dead detectives, two spirits holding hands, solving mysteries and crimes as ghosts. Probably one of the best happy endings before the new 52 hit, because the story beforehand was very exploitative and didn't add anything to her character. And finally, to wrap all of this up, let's talk about one of the funniest moments in all of superhero ever, basically, because this happened from a movie that forgot that this is one of the worst and most hated tropes of all time, and that is Deadpool 2 and their fridging of Vanessa. Now, Vanessa in 2016 Deadpool, their relationship was very central to that first movie. Vanessa was the emotional grounding, the motivation to endure his cancer treatment, and ultimately, that inspired his journey in Deadpool. Yes, she kind of was a damsel in distress, but a lot of us were kind of okay with it because she had so much character and ended up being the rock that ended up helping Wade become a better person. They had very good chemistry, they were independent, she was witty, and we really loved that dynamic. I enjoyed it personally. I don't know about everybody else. I'm talking about me personally. But at the start of Deadpool 2, Vanessa is killed in the first 10 minutes when gangsters break into their apartment and they shoot her. They cap her in the first 10 minutes. And that is framed as the catalyst for all of Wade's emotional spiral. And by the end of the film, everything gets set right. The rest of the movie, however, Deadpool is struggling with grief and trying to learn about family, to build his new family, and to grieve his former. It's a very classic trope that shouldn't have happened in that film. They should know better. It undercut the potential of them having a story arc together and preventing her from being one of the best love interests in superhero movies. But that got completely shafted, and we got robbed. I'm telling you, this is a grade A. Okay, let me stop. Let me calm myself down. And the worst part about this, in my opinion, is I'm pretty sure I'm going off my brain right now. In the Deadpool 2 Super Duper cut, which kinda drags on way too long in my opinion, they had one extra post-credit scene that was a gag of him using his time travel to save Vanessa from dying. And while this quote-unquote undoes her death in a very comedic way, all of that really undermines the emotional weight of the story they're trying to tell, and it raises more questions about whether he even fixed the fridging or just pushed it under the rug. Her death is one of the clearest mainstream movie examples, in my opinion, of women in refrigerators, especially relating to superheroes. And I think it sparked a lot of discourse in terms of reviews and essays about Deadpool's focus on this fridging instead of the film itself, which is obviously a fun and enjoyable movie. But why did it have to start off that way? There are more clever and fun calls to action they could have done with, I don't know, Days of Future Past, to like the apocalyptic future of Cable maybe coming to him, maybe having a whole Deadpool and Cable movie of them in the future and them doing crazy stuff there. There are so many ways they could have spun it. And being a fourth wall breaking superhero movie makes the decision even more baffling. They should know all this stuff as writers. They should have all of this in a bank ready to play with. This should have been a joke that they said in the movie, not something they went with for the entire 2-hour runtime. Do you see what I'm saying? That shouldn't have happened in the first place. Thankfully, by Deadpool 3, all of that is thrown to the side, but now she's not even with him, so we can't even go back to that dynamic. It really exposed how ingrained this trope is in superhero storytelling, and that is very sad to see, especially so late. That was 2018. Come on, we can do better. But yeah, guys, what do you think? What are your worst, most hated fridging moments in all of comics or superhero media? Feel free to leave it down in the comments down below. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Take care. Deuces.